Hi, welcome to another installment of Quarantining with OLLAS. My name is Jonathan Santo. I'm a faculty member in the psychology department at the University of Nebraska at Omaha, and I'm also the associate director of the Office of Latino and Latin American Studies. I wanted to talk to you today about a conference that some colleagues and I put together last week on coexistence, particularly coexistence in the time of COVID. Josefa da Cunha, professor in the Department of Education at the Federal University of Paraná in Curitiba, Brazil, along with his students, put together a conference last week called the Semana de Convivência, the Week of Coexistence. This conference was designed to bring together academics, members of the community, all to talk about what it's like to live in a world of the coronavirus and what we can do to help each other out. And I'm happy to report that UNO's Office of Latino and Latin American Studies co-sponsored this event. The Semana de Convivencia conference was open to the public at no cost, and we had almost 1,000 people register for the event that took place over the course of 3 days. And what I wanted to do is tell you a little bit about some of those talks. For example, Lina Saldariaga gave a great talk on socio-emotional competence, particularly in times of crisis. Her talk was designed to help parents develop a set of tools to dealing with the current stress that they're under and to keep in mind the developmental needs of their children. So she talked a lot about managing expectations and explaining what's going on in a way that children could understand. Moreover, Kendra Thomas at the University of Indianapolis spoke about resiliency and how resiliency is fostered through social responsibility and how parents can help children develop these virtues even during times of stress like in the current pandemic. And so her talk focused a lot on how to talk to children, but also how to develop that sense of social responsibility that we're all in this together. And lastly, Bonnie Leadbeater from the University of Victoria in Canada spoke about her program on developing social responsibility among communities. And so this was a very interesting talk because she's trying to implement this in collaboration with Josefa in Curitiba as well, helping kids develop a sense of social responsibility by working with their neighborhoods, working within their communities. And so this project that's going to take place over months and months and hopefully for 2 years to come is designed to look at long-term positive change and see how we can connect what we know about human development to actually help people in their day-to-day lives. We also had a screening of a documentary called Ottolado de Otto, The Other Side of the Other. And in addition to the screening of the movie, we also had a conversation with the director afterwards. The Other Side of the Other is a documentary filmed in Recife, Brazil, about two very different groups of children. Some of these kids were from poor neighborhoods and some of them were from rich neighborhoods. And what the filmmakers asked these kids to do was talk about their impression of the other group. What were those kids like? What did they care about? What did they do during the day? And then the filmmakers showed the other group's videos to those kids so that they could get a sense of what their lives are really like, and then eventually create a dialogue between the children to foster understanding overall. It's a powerful movie with a strong message about coexistence, even when people are coming from very different backgrounds. And I also wanted to fill you in on what I spoke about at the conference, specifically on the importance of online friendships for children and adolescents, particularly during the current pandemic. Most of my research is on adolescent peer relationships, specifically trying to disentangle how it is that these relationships foster healthy development over time. And we know a lot about how relationships serve as a positive role for people throughout the entire lifespan, but during adolescence, this plays a crucial role. Particularly, this is a period of the lifespan where children are learning how to behave by their interactions with their friends, but also the relationships they have with their peers serve to foster their self-esteem and give them a sense of their own competence interacting with others. Now, you can focus a lot on the positives, but I also have to talk about how we study when things with peers go wrong, particularly as it pertains to peer victimization and bullying. So some of what we can learn is to help kids who are struggling with their peers. But I'll say, having a 17 and a 14-year-old at home right now who would want nothing more than to be able to see their friends, part of why we study peer relations is because kids care about their peers and they want them to like them. We know a lot about the importance of friendships, particularly for children and adolescents. Part of that is by learning how friendships are formed through reciprocated liking, but also what friends do for each other during this period, providing a sense of validation, providing a sense of understanding and cooperation. And we also know that friends are similar to each other, but that similarity also strengthens over time. So friends are really important. I don't think that's a shock to anyone here. The really cool thing is that we can even measure the impact of friendships on our very physiology, specifically through a hormone called cortisol. Cortisol is secreted by the body during periods of stress, and it plays an activational role, essentially getting us ready for a fight or flight response. What I find absolutely fascinating is that as a social species, for us, physical threats and social threats are not all that different. And we can actually measure both of these stressors in the body. And so one easy way to do that is through saliva. So I'd love to tell you about a study we conducted several years ago that looked at all these issues, namely the importance of friendships to early adolescence, but also how this could be measured at a physiological level. So what we did is we had about 100 early adolescents, 9, 10, 11-year-olds in Montreal, Canada, fill out a bunch of questionnaires for us. And in fact, they filled out questionnaires multiple times a day over the course of 4 days. They filled out these questionnaires when they woke up in the morning, when they got to school, right after lunch, after recess, and one last time at the end of the school day. And what we asked them to do is to tell us what was going on in their lives for the last 20 minutes. Why we wanted to do that was because we wanted to get a sense of what was going on whilst cortisol was being secreted through their bodies. So we asked them to tell us who they were with, whether or not those interactions with people were positive or negative. We also asked them to tell us how they felt about themselves in the moment. And as we got this information from them through questionnaires, we also asked them to provide saliva samples for us to assay for salivary cortisol. I want to give you a little taste of what we found. So what you see here is the association between negative peer experiences and cortisol, specifically when kids said their best friend was not present. And so as you can see, the more negative the experience, the higher the cortisol, reflecting how stressful these negative peer experiences are for adolescents. When their best friend's not present. Now let's take a peek at what we found for those who had their best friend with them at the time. Here we see a completely different effect. There's essentially a flat line between how negative the experience is with their peers and cortisol, essentially showing us that having your best friend present has an effect on your physiology in response to stressful experiences. And so what we're saying based on this data is that friends help us in the moment deal with how stressful an actual experience is. Now, we're not the first ones to find this kind of effect. A number of other studies have found similar findings across the entire lifespan. The thing is, though, all of these studies are based on physical proximity. People were asked to tell us about who was with them in the moment or what their friends were doing while they were there. Now, however, it's a different story. The coronavirus has upended many of our lives, children and adolescents no less. In most of their cases, schools have been shut down, parks and playgrounds are closed, parents are discouraged from inviting other kids over for play dates, and so this effect of physical proximity and the role that friends play is now up in the air. As a result of the coronavirus epidemic, it's less clear now exactly what friends can do for children and adolescents without that sense of physical proximity. However, we're not flying completely blind. There's been research looking at online blogs, YouTube videos, gaming, and friendships through Twitter to show that friends still play an important role. All of this research, however, was sort of thought of to complement in-person friendships and the social support children and adolescents get from their friends on a daily basis, which is quite different now. What hasn't changed is the role that friends play for children and early adolescents in a variety of different ways, even though those interactions might have moved largely online. And as a result, we'll have to move online to study them as well. So friends matter now more than ever. And so in my talk, I covered the role that parents, educators, and academics can play in helping children understand and develop and learn, even in the current climate. But what I wanted to leave you with was this notion that part of what makes the coronavirus so successful in spreading among us is because of our need to be social. But with that sociality comes our ability to coordinate and cooperate with each other. And I think that's probably going to be our greatest strength in fighting this disease. And that was the Semana de Convivencia in a nutshell. We felt it went really well, brought a bunch of people together to talk about what little things we can do to help each other out. And really, I'm thrilled that I had a chance to talk to you all about it. Thank you for joining us for this Quarantining with OLLAS.